So I'm going to read the original oral folk tale that then became Little Red Riding Hood when Charles Perrault first adapted it. And then Perrault's version. I'll read. The Story of Grandmother. There was a woman who had made some bread. She said to her daughter, "Go carry this hot loaf and a bottle of milk to your granny." So the little girl departed. At the crossway she met Bazoo, the werewolf, who said to her, "Where are you going?" "I'm taking this hot loaf and a bottle of milk to my granny." "What path are you taking?" said the werewolf. "The path of needles or the path of pins?" "The path of needles," the little girl said. "All right, then I'll take the path of pins." The little girl entertained herself by gathering needles. Meanwhile the werewolf arrived at the grandmother's house, killed her, put some of her meat in the cupboard, and a bottle of her blood on the shelf. The little girl arrived and knocked at the door. "Push the door," said the werewolf. "It's barred by a piece of wet straw." "Good day, Granny. I've brought you a hot loaf of bread and a bottle of milk." "Put it in the cupboard, my child. Take some of the meat which is inside, and the bottle of wine on the shelf." After she had eaten, there was a little cat, which said, "Phooey! A slut is she who eats the flesh and drinks the blood of her granny." "Undress yourself, my child," the werewolf said, "and come lie down beside me." "Where should I put my apron?" "Throw it into the fire, my child. You won't be needing it any more." And each time she asked where she should put all her other clothes, the bodice, the dress, the petticoats, and the long stockings, the wolf responded, "Throw them into the fire, my child. You won't be needing them any more." When she laid herself down in the bed, the little girl said, "Oh, Granny, how hairy you are." "The better to keep myself warm, my child." "Oh, Granny, what big nails you have." "The better to scratch me with, my child." "Oh, Granny, what big shoulders you have." "The better to carry the firewood, my child." "Oh, Granny, what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my child." "Oh, Granny, what big nostrils you have." "The better to snuff my tobacco with, my child." "Oh, Granny, what a big mouth you have." "The better to eat you with, my child." "Oh, Granny, I've got to go badly. Let me go outside." "Do it in the bed, my child." "Oh, no, Granny, I want to go outside." "All right, but make it quick." The werewolf attached a woolen rope to her foot and let her go outside. When the little girl was outside, she tied the end of the rope to a plum tree in the courtyard. The werewolf became impatient and said, "Are you making a load out there? Are you making a load?" When he realized that nobody was answering him, he jumped out of bed and saw that the little girl had escaped. He followed her, but arrived at her house just at the moment she entered. So that's how that ends. And then we get Charles Perrault's Little Red Riding Hood from 1697, or Le Petit Chaperon Rouge, as it would be in French. Once upon a time there was a little village girl, the prettiest that had ever been seen. Her mother doted on her, and her grandmother even more. This good woman made her a little red hood, which suited her so well that she was called Little Red Riding Hood wherever she went. One day, after her mother had baked some biscuits, she said to Little Red Riding Hood, "Go see how your grandmother is feeling, for I have heard that she is sick. Take her some biscuits and this small pot of butter." Little Red Riding Hood departed at once to visit her grandmother, who lived in another village. In passing through a wood, she met old neighbor Wolf, who had a great desire to eat her. But he did not dare because of some woodcutters who were in the forest. He asked her where she was going. The poor child, who did not know that it is dangerous to stop and listen to a wolf, said to him, "I am going to see my grandmother, and I am bringing some biscuits with a small pot of butter which my mother has sent her." "Does she live far from here?" said the wolf. "Oh, yes," said Little Red Riding Hood. "You must pass the mill, which you can see right over there, and hers is the first house in the village." "Well then," said the wolf, "I want to go and see her too. I'll take this path here, and you take that path there, and we'll see who gets there first." The wolf began to run as fast as he could on the path which was shorter, and the little girl took the longer path, and she enjoyed herself by gathering nuts, running after butterflies, and making bouquets of small flowers which she found. It did not take the wolf long to arrive at the grandmother's house. He knocked. Tock, tock. "Who's there?" "It's your granddaughter, Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf, disguising his voice. "I've brought you some biscuits and a little pot of butter, which my mother has sent you." The good grandmother, who was in her bed because she was not feeling well, cried out to him, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will fall." The wolf pulled the bobbin and the door opened. He threw himself upon the good woman and devoured her quicker than a wink, for it had been more than 3 days since he had last eaten. After that he closed the door and laid down in the grandmother's bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood, who after a while came knocking at the door. Tock, tock. "Who's there?" When she heard the gruff voice of the wolf, Little Red Riding Hood was scared at first, but believing that her grandmother had a cold, she responded, "It's your granddaughter, Little Red Riding Hood. I brought you some biscuits and a little pot of butter which my mother has sent you." The wolf softened his voice and cried out to her, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will fall." Little Red Riding Hood pulled the bobbin and the door opened. Upon seeing her enter, the wolf hid himself under the bed covers and said to her, "Put the biscuits and the pot of butter on the bin and come lie down beside me." Little Red Riding Hood undressed and went to get into bed, where she was quite astonished to see the way her grandmother was dressed in her nightgown. She said to her, "What big arms you have, grandmother." "The better to hug you with, my child." "What big legs you have, grandmother." "The better to run with, my child." "What big ears you have, grandmother." "The better to hear you with, my child." "What big eyes you have, grandmother." "The better to see you with, my child." "What big teeth you have, grandmother." "The better to eat you." And upon saying these words, the wicked wolf threw himself upon Little Red Riding Hood and ate her up. Moral: one sees here that young children, especially young girls, pretty, well brought up, and gentle, should never listen to anyone who happens by, and if this occurs, it is not so strange when the wolf should eat them. I say the wolf, for all wolves are not of the same kind. There are some with winning ways, not loud nor bitter or angry, who are tame, good-natured, and pleasant, and follow young ladies right into their homes, right into their alcoves. But alas for those who do not know that of all the wolves, the docile ones are the ones who are the most dangerous. The end.